Oh, you supposed to hear again? Huh? You shut the lights off.
What happens when a rap beef stops being about music and turns into ownership papers, surveillance footage, and a locked studio door in the Bronx? On February 20th, 2026, the internet woke up to something nobody expected. 50 Cent posted security footage showing Jim Jones kicking in a locked studio door at the IFC Factory, the headquarters for the Let's Rap About It podcast. Within hours, 50 didn't just post the clip. He posted a lease termination notice. Then, he posted a photo claiming he now owns the building. Suddenly, this wasn't trolling. It wasn't diss tracks. It was landlord versus tenant, played out in front of millions. But here's where it gets wild. Instead of denying it, instead of getting angry, Jim Jones leaned in. Same outfit, same boots, posting a kung fu parody video with The Last Dragon playing in the background, turning humiliation into a character, turning exposure into promotion. So who really won? Was this a calculated business chess move by 50 Cent? Or did Jim Jones flip the narrative and use the spotlight to his advantage? Because beneath the memes and captions, there's a real dispute happening. And what happens next might decide everything. Tell me when you're ready for part 1. This story didn't start with a kicked door. It didn't even start with a lease. It started with a word. Late 2025, 50 Cent released a Netflix documentary he heavily promoted across every platform. As a producer and businessman, he positioned it as serious work, investigative, sharp, meaningful. It wasn't just content, it was brand extension. And when you understand 50, you understand that brand control is everything. During an episode of the Let's Rap About It podcast, filmed inside the IFC factory in the Bronx, Jim Jones and the crew discussed the documentary. Somewhere in that conversation, the word mockumentary was used. Now, to regular viewers, that might sound like casual critique, but in entertainment, mockumentary doesn't just mean bad. It suggests staged, fake, performed journalism disguised as truth. It implies the work lacks authenticity. And if there's one thing 50 Cent does not tolerate, it's someone publicly questioning the authenticity of his work. He didn't drop a diss track. He didn't jump on live screaming. He didn't even directly argue the point. Instead, he went quiet, publicly. Behind the scenes, though, something shifted. Because within weeks, posts started appearing on 50's Instagram that had nothing to do with documentaries and everything to do with rent. He began hinting that the IFC factory, the very studio where the podcast was filmed, was behind on payments. At first, it was subtle. A caption here, a comment there. Then it became more direct. Figures started being mentioned. $80,000, $150,000, $180,000, even whispers of numbers as high as $250,000. Whether every dollar amount was exact or not didn't matter in that moment. The narrative was being built. You criticize my work? Let's talk about your business. That shift is critical. Because 50 didn't attack the opinion. He attacked the infrastructure. He reframed the entire situation from artistic disagreement to financial instability. And that's a much more dangerous battlefield. Over the next few months, the situation kept escalating. Not loudly, but strategically. 50 allegedly posted audio clips of conversations with the building's owner, a man identified publicly as Sam. In those clips, discussions about overdue rent were referenced. The implication was clear. The podcast operation inside the IFC factory wasn't as solid as it appeared on camera. Meanwhile, Jim Jones tried to counter the narrative. He posted videos touring parts of the space. He showed upgrades, expansion, activity. The message from his side was simple. We're growing, not struggling. But 50 didn't argue. He amplified. When Dipset member Cameron joked about the studio lacking heat during winter months, 50 reposted it. When memes popped up about unpaid bills, he leaned into them. He turned every small comment into reinforcement. It wasn't explosive, it was cumulative. That's how pressure campaigns work. the public slowly began associating "let's rap about it" not just with hip-hop conversations, but with rent allegations. And in the age of social media, perception travels faster than paperwork. Now here's where the strategy becomes clear. By January 2026, according to the lease notice later posted, a 15-day default notice had allegedly been issued around January 5th. That cure period reportedly expired around January 22nd. That means, if accurate, that legally the tenancy was already in jeopardy weeks before any footage surfaced. And that's important, because when February 19th arrived and surveillance cameras inside the IFC factory hallway recorded Jim Jones repeatedly kicking and striking a locked studio door until it opened, this wasn't a random act caught on tape. It was the climax of months of tension. The next day, February 20th, 50 Cent posted the footage. Multiple angles, clear timestamps, no dramatic music, just hallway cameras and a locked door giving way under force. Then came the second layer, the lease termination notice, addressed to Joseph Jones, referencing the earlier default notice, suggesting the lease had been dead for nearly a month by the time the door was kicked. That sequencing matters, because now the visual aligned with the narrative that had been building for months. Alleged unpaid rent, expired lease, locked door, forced entry. Whether the full legal context was more complicated didn't matter to the internet. The optics were devastating. And then, as if that wasn't enough, 50 posted again. This time a photo with Sam, the building's owner. Caption: "Sam is my partner. I own the joint. Now you're going to fix every door you kick, or I'm going to kick you, Jimmy. By Monday, you're destroying my property." That line changed the entire tone. This wasn't rapper versus rapper anymore. This was landlord versus tenant. And psychologically, that's a different power dynamic. 50 wasn't just exposing footage. He was positioning himself above the situation. Ownership is leverage. Ownership is authority. Ownership is control. Even if no public deed had been confirmed at that point, the claim itself reframed the conflict. Now every time Jim Jones entered that building, in the public imagination, he was walking into 50's property. That's not an accident. 50 has a long history of using business angles to overpower rivals. He understands that public humiliation hits harder when it's attached to documentation. Screenshots feel real. Lease notices feel official. Surveillance footage feels undeniable. It creates a sense of inevitability. And what made February 20th so effective wasn't just the content, it was the payoff. Every meme from December, every rent comment in January, every reposted joke, they all led to this one visual moment. A locked door, a kick, a building allegedly no longer yours. By the end of that day, hip-hop media pages were flooded. Headlines questioned whether Jim Jones was facing legal trouble. Comment sections exploded with debates over eviction law in New York. Some celebrated 50's business savvy, others criticized the public nature of it. But everyone was watching. And that's the part that matters most. Because in the middle of what looked like embarrassment was opportunity. And what Jim Jones did next would determine whether this story ended as humiliation or transformation. By the afternoon of February 20th, the narrative looked locked in. The footage was everywhere. The lease notice was circulating. The photo of 50 Cent standing next to the building owner was being reposted across every major hip-hop blog. Comment sections were ruthless. The storyline felt complete. Unpaid rent, expired lease, forced entry, new landlord claiming control. Most people in that position would go silent. Some would call lawyers. Some would threaten lawsuits. Some would respond emotionally and make it worse. Jim Jones did none of that. Instead, he posted a video. Same day, same energy cycle, no delay. And what made the video genius wasn't just what he did. It was how fast he did it. He appeared on camera wearing the exact same outfit seen in the surveillance footage. Same dark clothing, same boots. No attempt to distance himself from the clip. No denial. No explanation. He leaned directly into it. Behind him on a large screen played The Last Dragon, a cult classic deeply respected in hip-hop culture. The film blends martial arts with Black identity and 80s swagger. It's nostalgic, it's iconic, it carries cultural weight. Jim looked at the camera and began performing exaggerated martial arts moves. Fast hand chops, kicks, dramatic poses, over-the-top energy. He wasn't fighting the narrative, he was remixing it. The door-kicking clip that was supposed to symbolize desperation suddenly became martial arts theatrics. Kung Fu Jim was born in real time. The caption? Playful, casual, laughing tone, mentioning watching a movie on the big screen, saying they had cable, subtle flex, subtle denial without saying denial. That post did two critical things at once. First, it removed the sting of the footage. When you laugh at yourself before others can, you control the punchline. Second, it reframed the attention as promotion. Instead of looking like someone under pressure, he looked like someone capitalizing on free marketing. And then he doubled down. Later that day, after 50 claimed ownership of the building and issued a public "fix the door by Monday" deadline, Jim went to his Instagram story. He didn't address the ownership claim directly. He didn't argue the legality. He wrote something simple. "Give me a second. I'm trying to figure out what I need to promo while I got the spotlight again." That line was surgical, because it flipped the power dynamic. 50 thought he was applying pressure. Jim reframed it as publicity. Then came another slide. Words along the lines of, "This fool promoting me free." That's psychological judo. When someone tries to embarrass you publicly, the goal is to make you shrink. If you instead expand, if you treat the moment as a spotlight, you take back control of the emotional energy. And in internet culture, perception is reality. By the end of that day, timelines weren't just filled with eviction debates. They were filled with Kung Fu Jim memes, edits, soundtracks, reaction videos. Instead of trending as rapper caught breaking into studio, he was trending as a character. That pivot matters, because viral cycles are short. If you don't shape the second half of the narrative, the first half defines you. Jim shaped the second half immediately. Now here's the deeper layer most people missed. This wasn't random improvisation. Jim Jones has been in the public eye for decades. He understands spectacle. He understands persona. He understands how to turn adversity into brand energy. By appearing in the same outfit, he made it clear the video was directly connected to the footage. That wasn't accidental. That was intentional continuity. By choosing The Last Dragon, he tapped into nostalgia and cultural pride instead of defensiveness. By teasing IFC news coming soon, he signaled momentum rather than retreat. He created forward motion, and forward motion is everything in media. If you freeze, you lose. If you move, you survive. Now let's talk about the psychological difference between both approaches. 50's strategy was dominance through documentation, receipts, notices, surveillance, ownership claims, deadlines. Jim's strategy was dominance through charisma, humor, timing, performance, promotion. Two completely different battle philosophies. One says, "I have leverage." The other says, "I have energy." And here's why Jim's approach worked in that moment. Audiences online reward confidence more than they reward facts. Legal nuances about New York eviction law? That's slow content. Kung Fu Jim doing dramatic kicks in front of a big screen? That's fast content. Speed wins viral battles. Within hours, major media pages reposted the Kung Fu clip. Influencers reacted. Comment sections filled with laughing emojis instead of pity. And something subtle shifted. Instead of the story being about unpaid rent, it became about who handled the moment better. Now that doesn't mean the underlying business issue disappeared. It didn't. If there were arrears, they still existed. If a lease was terminated, that status didn't magically reset. If ownership changed, paperwork still matters. But emotionally, publicly, Jim neutralized the embarrassment factor. That's not a small thing, because embarrassment is what makes stories stick negatively. He refused to wear that. Instead, he wore a character. But here's where things get even more layered. By not attacking 50 directly in response, Jim avoided escalation. He didn't threaten. He didn't insult. He didn't challenge physically. He joked. And jokes are harder to escalate against without looking overly serious. If 50 responded aggressively to Kung Fu Jim, it risks making him look bothered. If he ignored it, Jim's version continues spreading. It created a stalemate, but on entertainment terms. Now the internet had two parallel narratives running simultaneously. Narrative 1, 50 Cent, the calculated businessman exposing alleged financial instability. Narrative 2, Jim Jones, the charismatic veteran turning a lockout into free promo. Both men looked strategic. Neither looked panicked. And that's rare in public disputes. But here's the question nobody answered that week. Who actually controlled the real-world outcome? Because social media battles end in 24 hours. Leases don't. And beneath all the memes and captions, there was still a building. Still a contract. Still money potentially owed. Still questions about who legally had access. The cameras showed a door being kicked open. They didn't show what happened the next morning in private meetings. They didn't show whether repairs were made. They didn't show whether new agreements were negotiated. They didn't show whether court filings were prepared. That's the difference between performance and process. And while the world debated who won the internet, the real fight may have been happening somewhere much quieter. Underneath the memes, under the captions, under the viral edits and laughing emojis, there was something much heavier sitting in the background of this entire situation. A building, a lease, money. And in New York City, those things are never small. The IFC factory wasn't just a cool backdrop for a podcast. It was infrastructure. It was cameras mounted, lighting rigs installed, soundproofing built in, furniture placed, branding printed, production workflow established. For let's rap about it, it wasn't just a studio. It was the engine behind the content. So when 50 Cent posted that lease termination notice, it wasn't just internet trolling. It suggested a disruption to the foundation of the operation. According to the document he shared, a 15-day default notice had been issued in early January 2026, with the cure period expiring later that month. If accurate, that would mean the legal process toward termination had already been moving weeks before the February 19th footage was recorded. But here's where things get complex. In New York, commercial tenant law isn't always as simple as lease expired, locks changed. Even when a lease is terminated, landlords typically must go through formal court proceedings to execute an eviction. Self-help evictions, meaning changing locks or blocking access without court authorization, can create legal issues, even if rent is overdue. That nuance matters. Because if police were allegedly called after the door incident, and if access was restored in any capacity, that suggests the situation may not have been as straightforward as trespassing. However, as of the timeline surrounding February 25, 2026, there were no publicly confirmed court filings circulating widely in media coverage. No verified lawsuits trending. No public criminal charges. No official deed transfer documentation proving ownership change beyond the Instagram photo with Sam. That's important. Because while social media painted a complete story, the legal system moves slower, and publicly verifiable records matter. Now step back and look at the broader picture. Jim Jones is not a rookie artist. He's a veteran with decades in the industry. He's navigated label deals, group dynamics, business shifts, public controversies. He understands optics. 50 understands leverage. What we witnessed wasn't chaos. It was two experienced men operating in different lanes. 50 weaponized documentation. Jim weaponized personality. 50 applied pressure publicly. Jim absorbed pressure theatrically. But real-world consequences don't respond to theatrics. They respond to paperwork. If arrears truly existed in the ranges discussed, $80,000, $150,000, $180,000 or more, that's substantial for any independent content operation. Podcast revenue isn't always predictable. Advertising deals fluctuate. Production costs remain constant. Running a multi-host, production-heavy podcast in New York City is expensive. Rent alone in commercial spaces can be brutal. add utilities, staff, equipment maintenance, and marketing. Margins tighten quickly. Some observers also questioned something else. Why did the public heat land primarily on Jim Jones when the podcast includes multiple co-hosts? Where were the shared financial responsibilities? Was he the leaseholder individually? Was the business structured through an entity? Were there internal agreements the public doesn't see? Those details were never clarified publicly in a concrete way during that viral week, and that silence leaves room for speculation, which social media fills instantly. Meanwhile, 50's ownership claim shifted perception, whether legally formalized or not. Even without publicly verified documents, the image of him standing next to the building owner and declaring partnership changed how audiences interpreted every move afterward. Perception is currency. If people believe you control the building, they assume power. But perception and proof are different currencies in courtrooms, and that's where this story may eventually settle. Not on Instagram, not in meme pages, but in contracts and filings that never go viral. The other reality is this: deadlines issued on social media don't automatically translate to legal enforcement. 50's Fix Every Door by Monday line created urgency for viewers, but there was no confirmed public follow-up proving consequences if it wasn't met. No public report of a lawsuit filed Monday morning. No confirmed eviction executed by marshals that week. No official statement closing the loop, which means as of that snapshot in time, the conflict remained suspended, not resolved. That suspension is fascinating because it reveals something deeper about modern hip-hop disputes. They now operate on two levels simultaneously. Level 1. Content. Fast, viral, loud, emotional. Level 2. Business. Slow, structured, documented. The audience lives in Level 1. The consequences live in Level 2. And often, by the time Level 2 concludes, the internet has already moved on. So who actually came out ahead? If you measure by viral engagement, both did. If you measure by narrative dominance, 50 controlled the power storyline, Jim controlled the entertainment storyline. If you measure by long-term operational stability, that answer requires information the public didn't have. What this situation really exposed wasn't just tension between two rappers. It exposed how vulnerable independent media ventures can be when infrastructure becomes part of public warfare. It exposed how quickly financial disputes become reputational weapons. It exposed how modern beef isn't about diss tracks anymore. It's about documents. And it demonstrated something else. Humor is armor. When Jim turned into Kung Fu Jim, he built emotional insulation. He signaled to fans, "I'm not stressed. I'm not defeated. I'm entertained." That matters. Because audiences don't just pick sides based on facts. They pick sides based on energy. 50 projected dominance. Jim projected resilience. And in 2026 media culture, resilience sells almost as well as power. But here's the final layer. Regardless of who won online, the door still had to be fixed. The lease still had terms. The money, if owed, still had numbers attached. The cameras caught a kick. They didn't catch the meeting afterward. They didn't catch negotiations, if any happened. They didn't catch attorneys reviewing clauses. And until those things surface publicly, this story remains unfinished. It's not about who laughed last on Instagram. It's about who controls the next chapter quietly. Because in business conflicts disguised as entertainment, the loudest moment is rarely the final one. If there's one thing this situation proved, it's that in today's industry, beef isn't just about bars anymore. It's about leverage, timing, and who controls the narrative. 50 Cent played chess with paperwork. Jim Jones played chess with personality. And the internet watched every move like it was a championship match. But here's the real question. Who do you think came out on top? Was this a masterclass in business dominance? Or did Kung Fu Jim flip the script and turn pressure into promotion? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is far from over. I want to hear your take. And if you rock with deep breakdowns like this, where we go beyond the headlines and really analyze what's happening behind the scenes, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Because trust me, in this industry, the cameras might catch the moment, but we break down the meaning. I'll see you in the next video.